let's start with number 10, Winnie the Pooh characters. The first theory on our list comes from an article published in the Canadian Medical Association Journal, so pretty legit. And also, it's one of my longer forays into the material I'm studying, so buckle up. In 2000, Sarah Shea from the Division of Developmental Pediatrics at Dalhousie University wrote an article with her colleagues. This article journeys through diagnosing each of the main characters of Winnie the Pooh with different states of neurological disorders. I'm gonna give you the highlights of what the article alleges because it kind of goes in really deep. First, the title character, Winnie the Pooh, himself, they say, has ADHD, or Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, and OCD, Obsessive Compulsive Disorder. Second, the study says that Piglet has generalized anxiety disorder, which accounts for his anxious, blustering, and flustered demeanor. Third, it says that Eeyore has chronic dysthymia, or another way of saying he has persistent mild depression, and they say this explains his negative outlook. Next, it continues to say that Owl is bright, but dyslexic. And then finally, when it comes to Tigger, the article isn't final on anything, but they try to say his behaviors are hyperactive and impulsive. This article theorizes more about possible treatment plans for even more characters, and the ones listed above, it goes into even more detail. Plus, other people online have shared other arguments for what characters represent with different diagnoses, but I could deep dive on this one theory honestly for a full 10 minutes, but we have other things to do here, and we're only at number 10 of our list, and we need to keep going. On to number 9. Frozen, Kristoff, and Sven. So let's jump to a more recent Disney production, Frozen. In Frozen, we see Kristoff in warm clothes to keep cozy in the cold climate of Arendelle, and this makes sense. People harvest ice in this movie titled Frozen, so it's bound to be cold. That's not where this conspiracy theory is. We need to take a closer look at Kristoff's wardrobe, then to his adorable reindeer sidekick, Sven, then back to his wardrobe. See anything? Any similarities? There is a theory that Kristoff wears Sven's mom's pelt, wears it as it. Ice harvesters in Arendelle see this orphan Kristoff in blistering cold weather, so they dress him in the tanned hide of a reindeer. But these theories are suggesting that this reindeer hide is Sven's mom, because Sven doesn't have a mother in the movie either. Is Sven just a reindeer so he doesn't notice, or has Kristoff convinced him otherwise? It's something to think about, people, honestly. But anyways, on to number 8, Fairly Odd Parents. Now, this show aired both on Nickelodeon and Disney XD, so it makes the list of Disney theories. Plus, it's too interesting to skip, so good enough reason for me. What this theory suggests is that Timmy's fairies in the show are metaphors for antidepressants. Now, stick with me. The evidence people use is that they arrived when his problems began, then that they are only around when he needs them, as in needing them to balance out the chemical imbalance in his brain. There was also a moment in the episode Channel Chasers when it was mentioned that they would be around for a long time, like him using them for a long time. Importantly, there are side effects when he abuses his wishing powers, just like there are side effects for abusing prescription drugs for mental health illnesses. This might get you thinking about what the other fairies represent as well, so if you think of anything cool, just let me know in a comment. I want to hear it. Number 7. Calhoun from Wreck-It Ralph. Sergeant Calhoun from Wreck-It Ralph was a badass, no doubt. But there's an element of her backstory that I looked into that may give you some pause if you're thinking of putting her on a pedestal or something. On her wedding day, Calhoun's soon-to-be husband Brad was eaten by a cybug. The thing is, cybugs turn into what they eat. So, when the sergeant was firing at the creature and we don't see the beast itself, only Calhoun's face, the reality is she may have been shooting at a cybug with Brad's face on it. And that's some emotional trauma even Fix-It Felix can't touch. Number 6. Captain Hook and Ariel. Peter Pan came out in 1953 and brought with it the notorious pirate character Captain Hook. Already the villain in his own story, could he be the villain in another? Hitting fast forward over 50 years later, The Little Mermaid, Ariel's Beginning comes out. It's a prequel to the 1989 classic and has Disney theorists bringing out that red string. The prequel revealed that Ariel's mom, Queen Athena, had been killed by pirates. And you see where I'm going with this? This is backed up by the fact that in a lagoon, we saw a bunch of mermaids, including a red-headed mermaid that looked pretty familiar in Peter Pan. So, could Hook be the leader of the crew of pirates that killed Queen Athena? Have you seen the hook on his hand? I think he could do it. He's a pirate. Now, number 5. Peter Pan. Sticking to the movie Captain Hook is in, let's switch to examine Peter Pan himself. Now, this theory doesn't line up with the last one, so really, if you like this one, it kind of invalidates the last one, so you have to pick which one you believe. This one needs some history with it, so we need to get all on the same page. Peter Pan the movie is based off J.M. Barrie's titular character in the play of the same name that came out in 1904, and on the book Peter and Wendy that came out a little later in 1911. Barrie also lost his brother when his brother was only 13, so people think this this may be where he got the idea of never growing up. So where does this leave Peter Pan? The theory is that he is the angel of death and that Neverland is a form of afterlife. Pulling Captain Hook into this, the pirate could be seen as the devil if you look into this as a depiction of hell in the Christian sense, is what some people have been saying, but I have my own idea about Peter Pan as the angel of death that you can stick around here at the end of the video, but my own conspiracy theory spiral will have to wait, so let's skip that and jump to a princess movie next. Number 4. Prince Charming from Snow White. When you think Prince Charming, you think the classic embodiment of everything a princess should want, but in Snow White, this character may not be what he seems. Matt Morgan, a commentator on a BuzzFeed article, equated Prince Charming to the Grim Reaper. He listed a bunch of parallels. The first time Snow White sees Prince Charming, she is scared and nearly falls into a well and dies, mimicking a fear of death. 2. Her next brush with death is a poison apple, and then this prince comes riding in on a pale white horse. At the time of the movie's release, coming in on a pale white horse was a depiction of what Death rode himself. Then 3. The kiss of death. Death kissing Snow White to literally take the breath of life from her. Death as in the prince. And yeah, there's more. Do you remember Snow White and the prince riding off into a castle that was surrounded by clouds and golden light? And the dwarfs didn't follow them, instead they said goodbye? Well, that's because Morgan's theory states that the living can't follow them into heaven or a heavenly looking afterlife. So there's a dead princess theory for you. Now it's time to switch gears. And when I say gears, I mean number 3, we're talking about cars. If you are familiar with the Pixar theory that all movies are connected, you and others will realize that there's a problem with the theory when it comes to the movie Cars. In the reality of Cars, it's a world without humans. The theory is that the human race in the future is wiped out, possibly murdered, and that cars have gained sentience. If you think this one is a little wild, don't think it's too far out there. Screen Crush interviewed Cars creative director Jay Ward, and his theory lines up. Ward theorized that Cars took over with their advanced AI and then adopted the personalities of their previous owners, took over and adopted the personalities like, no thank you. So let's check out another theory set in the future. This one's number 2, Aladdin. Now there's quite a few theories on Aladdin, but this one floating around the internet is that it's set in a post-apocalyptic future. This theory hinges on the fact that Genie wasn't in the lamp before the 3rd century, as it uses a line from the movie to back up its claims. Genie says Aladdin's clothes are much too 3rd century, therefore he wouldn't have been in the lamp at that time. He would have been just roaming around. That time for us is the year 300 in the Common Era, which is over 1700 years ago. The thing is, Genie mentions he's been stuck in the lamp for over 10,000 years, which moves our timeline way forward. So Agrabah could be a post-apocalyptic society that goes back to not using technology and could have been inspired by old ways. Finally, this theory is also backed up by the fact that Genie makes countless references to the 20th century, and while you might tie that to the fact it's a movie that came out in 1992, I say keep to continuity. And now for the most tragic and scary theory of them all. Number 1, Carl from Up. We all know I cried at the beginning of Up. Before anything bad actually happened, the movie had me in tears. But this theory just makes it all worse. I'm just gonna say it. What if Carl was dead the entire time? When I say the entire time, I mean once he is 78 years old after the tragic montage of waterfalling tears. The theory starts when Carl decides to follow his lifelong dream of going to Paradise Falls. His balloon equation is impossible, so this theory ventures to explain that by saying all of his experiences were symbolic and he was already dead by this point. They say his trip to Paradise Falls is a journey of acceptance guided by a guardian angel, wilderness explorer Russell. When they make it back to the city, it's also a symbolic meaning of making it back into heaven. Now within this, there's also a sub-theory that says Charles Muntz is a fallen angel selling hellhounds, the talking dogs, to drag Carl into the underworld. And so do with that one what you do. And well, that's the top 10 I have for you today. And what do you think? Which ones do you think hold some merit and which ones are you not so sure about? If there's one you want me to dive into more or one I didn't even talk about or touch on, just let me know. If you like the topic of Disney, let me know if you want to see what is rumored to be scary about Disneyland or Disney World, or also let me know your favorite Disney movie because I want to have a movie marathon soon and I want to hear your recommendations. My favorite Disney movie is Tangled, and it's hard to change my mind, but you can try if you want to argue with me on that one. Oh, also, at the beginning of the video I said stick around for my theories, so let's start with that Peter Pan one, aka Angel of Death one. What I was thinking was that it might draw closer to Greek mythology. Hook would be more of a Hades character, ruler ruler of the underworld, because Neverland would be the underworld in this case. Tinkerbell could be Charon or Charon, the ferryman that guided souls across the river Styx, or even take the word ferryman. Ferry like the boat ferry, or ferry like the Tinkerbell ferry, what I'm saying? And so where does that leave our boy Peter Pan? Peter Pan would be seen as Hermes, and Hermes isn't just a god that delivers dead souls to Charon, which in itself mirrors Peter Pan getting Tinkerbell's help to bring people to Neverland. Hermes, among other things, is also a god of trickery. Peter Pan, that's all I'm saying.
For number 10 spot, we have Finding Nemo, the 5 stages of grief. A large community on Reddit was shocked to hear of one person's theory about the infamous Disney movie Finding Nemo. The user concluded that the movie was demonstrating the 5 stages of grief. The theory is that Nemo actually died with his siblings and mother, and that Marlin imagines a single egg surviving, demonstrating the first stage of denial, where he refused to accept that the horrific event happened. Then it becomes anger when Nemo does anything even remotely dangerous. Then moves into bargaining, which Marlin does quite frequently on his quest to find Nemo. Then he eventually feels despair when he becomes ready to give up on the search. And then comes acceptance, where he finally is at peace and learns to not obsess over Nemo. I wouldn't put it past Disney to have at least developed the idea from this starting point. This theory feels pretty accurate to me. If you're liking this video so far, don't forget to smash that like button, as it will really help us out. In our number 9 spot, we have The Little Mermaid Hunter. In the original Little Mermaid, we learn that Ariel has a mother, but we never learn what happened to her until the 2008 movie The Little Mermaid: Ariel's Beginning. That is when we find out that Ariel's mother Athena was killed by a pirate ship, which is why King Triton hates humans. Well, perhaps you may have heard of another Disney tale with pirates called Peter Pan, and in this tale, Captain Hook, the villain of the story, is the captain of a pirate ship. We also see a group of mermaids in Peter Pan at Mermaid's Lagoon, and one of them looks an awful lot like Ariel, and she is even wearing a gold crown. Probably the queen. So that of course has led to the theory that it was Captain Hook's ship that killed Ariel's mother, and therefore Captain Hook killed her. That one blew my mind. In our number 8 spot, we have The Frozen Wisdom. I don't need to pray for this theory to be real or not, because it's awesome and it just deserved an honorable mention. People are convinced that the writers of Frozen 2 may have perhaps gone to a lot of therapy in their time, or worked with psychologists to help write the film, because the film is filled with the most amount of wisdom. The type of wisdom you only hear from your therapist. Just do the next right thing, Anna sings as she makes the horrible realization that her sister Elsa and her friend Olaf have passed away. Anna sings about the grief that she is feeling and describes a heaviness that only people that have truly suffered from depression would understand. She goes on to coach herself to do the next right thing, take one step at a time. The best piece of advice you could give someone when they're in the thick of it all. In another case, the people of Arendelle have to evacuate, and after the chaos, Olaf lets all of the young ones play with him and stick icicles in him. He says to them, "We call this controlling what you can when things feel out of control." Another wonderful piece of advice. In our number 7 spot, we have Peter Pan the Psychopath. Now we all know that Neverland is a place where you never have to grow up and you can be a kid forever. And that's all Peter wants for his friends, whether you're a lost boy or a darling. Sure, fun and games all day sounds amazing. But what if you get tired of childhood and decide it's time to grow up? Well, this theory suggests that Peter doesn't take too kindly to adults, even if they started off as friends. In fact, he hates adults so much that he wants to kill them. There are few adults in the movie, the main ones we see being Captain Hook and the crew of the Jolly Roger, and we know how much Peter hates them, so what if the Lost Boys decided it's time to become Lost Men? Well, following this theory, Peter kills any of the Lost Boys who try to grow up and finds new ones to take their place, so he has friends to play with forever. Captain Hook was actually one of the Lost Boys in the past and learned the truth of who or what Peter is and escapes, rescuing others as he does, and they grow up into the crew. Ooh, this is why Hook hates Pan so much, so maybe Hook wasn't the villain after all. In our number 6 spot, we have a scorned lover. Ooh, this is a juicy fan theory that honestly feels like whomever came up with it must have also known the pain of being betrayed. The theory is around the movie The Beauty and the Beast, and the theory goes that the witch or enchantress that had created the curse that turned the prince into the beast and all of his royal courtiers into what are usually inanimate objects did so because she was a lover scorned. She and the beast were former lovers, and he dismissed her once he got bored of her, which is something that royals were known to do in the past. The courtiers also would have treated her badly because they are loyal to the prince, so she placed a curse on them to teach them a lesson about respecting women. I see it. It makes more sense than a witch trapping the whole house just because the prince was prideful. There was clearly a deeper lesson afoot. In our number 5 spot, we have Eeyore's origin. Eeyore, everyone's favorite depressed donkey. While everyone in the 100-Acre Wood is usually pretty carefree and happy, Eeyore seems to always be in a bad mood, and I would be too if my tail kept getting lost or stolen and my house collapsed all the time. But some theorists think that there is a more sinister reason for the gloomy nature. But for that, we need to go all the way back to the 1940s movie Pinocchio. In the film, our puppet protagonist becomes a real boy, and after some wild adventuring, he is rewarded with a trip to Pleasure Island, a land where you can do anything you want and no grown-ups can stop you. But there is a curse placed on the island, and anyone who indulges is turned into a donkey. And we see in the movie that many of the donkeys can still talk. So the theory suggests that Eeyore was once a real boy, and he made the mistake of going to Pleasure Island and was cursed to take his more furry form. But it seems he managed to escape to the safety of the 100-Acre Wood, and now he lives out the rest of his days longing to regain his lost humanity. In our number 4 spot, we have Moana died. This is yet another very interesting and thought out theory around the movie Moana. In the beginning of the movie, Moana is on her boat, stuck in a thunderstorm, when the boat was struck by lightning. It is theorized that she died on the boat, which is most likely what would happen to any living being. The theory is expanded to state that Moana's spirit is completing the quest for the rest of the journey, and that is why she only meets gods and spirits the rest of the way. She is on their plane of existence. Then the theorist went on to state that after she finishes her quest, her spirit goes back into her body, and that is when she goes back to her island. Ooh, I bet you that some of these Reddit theorists are really just Disney employees, just, revealing secrets that they could only reveal anonymously. In our number 3 spot, we have The Fly. In the movie The Emperor's New Groove, Yzma has all sorts of potions to turn people into any animal you can think of, and she turns Kuzco into a llama. But I'm sure this isn't the only time she's done something like this. While most of the animals in the movie can't be understood by humans, like the squirrel only being able to communicate to Kronk through squeaks and gestures, there are obviously animals that can talk. Kuzco as the llama, Yzma as a cat, and there is one other strange example that throws the whole world of the film for a loop: the fly stuck in the spider's web. While walking in the forest, Kuzco sees a fly trapped in a web, and it is yelling out for help, but it's devoured quickly. Now, while this is an obvious reference to the 1958's The Fly, it also begs the question of who else has Yzma turned into animals. Was this one of Kuzco's once loyal subjects? And are there other jungle creatures who used to be humans out there? Let's hope they at least got to be better ones than a fly. In our number 2 spot, we have the evil trolls. Okay, here's another Frozen theory for you. What if Prince Hans wasn't actually evil? What if he was manipulated by magic? A lot of fans online thought that Prince Hans, who had a plot twist of being the overarching villain of the story, was a little out of left field. He was seemingly so good for most of the story, and then all of a sudden he was evil. Well, one Reddit user had a very good theory on this. The trolls, who are a part of Kristoff's family, have some very rare magic, and as they have Kristoff's best interests at heart, perhaps they used magic to change Anna and Hans's path and turn Hans evil so that Kristoff could end up with Anna. Arguably, it's probably for the best, as she actually had a friendship with Kristoff, and all she knew about Prince Hans was that they had a few things in common, like chocolate and sandwiches. Not a solid basis for a lasting relationship, but still, perhaps the trolls altered Anna and Prince Hans's path, and they are the true villains of the story. And finally, we reach our #1 spot, Walt's mom. Walt Disney, of course. Ever wonder why none of the princesses or main characters in Disney movies seem to have mothers? Or at least ones who are still alive? I mean, Cinderella, Bambi, Ariel, Belle, Jasmine, the list goes on and on. Well, some think that this is actually related to a terrible tragedy in the Disney family. In 1937, Walt and his brother Roy bought their parents a house with their newfound success, a dream for anyone. But unfortunately, this would be a terrible mistake. One day, their mother Flora called Walt to complain that their furnace was leaking gas. Walt sent some folks from the studio over to fix it, and they did, or so they thought. The next morning, the housekeeper returned to find Mr. and Mrs. Disney unconscious and dragged them out into the front lawn. Their father was taken to a hospital and survived, but unfortunately their mother passed away at the scene. This tragedy was well known by those who worked at the studio, and many thought that it affected the stories they told going forward, that Walt was so traumatized that he passed the trauma onto the characters in the films as a way to move on himself. Either way, it's interesting to look into the man who created an empire.
10. WALL-E destroyed the Earth. Now, while WALL-E is definitely one of the cutest characters Pixar has created, even though he's just a robot, this theory shows that cute doesn't always mean peaceful. The theory goes that WALL-E was just another waste collection robot built to help with the Earth Recovery Act, but he either had some crossed wires or just wasn't very good at his job, and he loved to collect trinkets and little human artifacts. But all the other robots just doing their job were compacting anything and everything they could get their little grippers on, including WALL-E's stuff. This made the little robot snap, and he started destroying the other robots bit by bit and keeping the parts for himself. We see this in the movie when he takes a part off of a downed robot to replace his worn out treads. Over time, WALL-E cannibalized the rest of the robots, allowing him to continue to function for over 700 years, way past his original life cycle. And now he can collect his trinkets while still doing his job in peace. But at what cost? With all of the other collection units broken, the trash problem only gets worse until we see the world as it stands at the beginning of the film. Number 9. Andy's Monster. Before I move on, please hit those like and subscribe buttons if you're enjoying the video so far. I'd really appreciate it. In Monsters Inc., we learn that all children have a monster that is assigned to scare them so that they can collect the screams for energy. But since all the Pixar movies are connected, that means that characters from other movies have monsters too. In one of the training montage scenes in Monsters Inc., we see Randall Boggs practicing his camouflage skills up against many different backgrounds, one of which is the same blue sky with clouds wallpaper we see on Andy from Toy Story's bedroom walls. Since Randall is the only one who can turn invisible like this, it shows that he is preparing up against things he may actually have to blend into. Randall seems to be the reason that Andy needs his toys for protection. Other scenes in the movie show a room that has the same poster Sid does in his room, showing another connection to Toy Story and why Sid may have been so mean. Number 8. Marriage turned inside out. I love Inside Out for giving a generation of kids a way to think about their emotions and teach them that finding a balance and talking about your emotions is the real key to happiness. But not all the characters in the movie have learned that lesson yet. It seems as though Riley's parents have a lot of work to do on their own, or more likely, together. When we have the brief glimpses inside of her parents' heads, we can see what's really going on. Sometimes her dad just isn't listening and is replaying an old memory, or sometimes they're distracted by their own emotions. While we would all hope that joy is the emotion running all of our controls, it seems that her parents aren't so lucky. Her dad's main emotion seems to be anger, with him running the show, yelling and getting literally hot-headed at the slightest things, while inside her mom's head, sadness takes center stage. This shows that the two may not be in the healthiest of places on their own, let alone as a couple. And I'm sure that this has led to some strife in Riley's life. Personally, I think that everyone needs to see a therapist a few times in their life. It really helps, I promise. And hopefully Riley's parents get some counseling and can learn to put joy back at the center of their controls. Number 7. All in the Family. While the story of Ratatouille takes us on a journey of Linguini becoming an amazing chef, thanks to his rat friend Remy, for lack of a better term, driving him from under his chef's hat, many believe that this is not the first time that this has happened in the Pixar universe. If you look closely at the cover of the Food and Wine magazine in the opening sequence, you can just make out what appears to be something under Chef Gusteau's hat. Some believe that this is his own little chef who helped Gusteau become the culinary star he was. But if a quick picture isn't enough to convince you, how about this? When Skinner is trying to figure out if Linguini really is the heir to Gusteau's restaurant, he has a DNA test performed. He uses hair taken from Gusteau's hat and some DNA collected from Linguini. But the first time the lawyer ran the sample, it came back as rodent hair. We're led to believe that this was a hair taken from Linguini and was mixed up with Remy the rat's hair. But we never see a hair sample taken from Linguini. It's actually implied that Skinner used saliva that he got from the wine glass when he and Linguini were drinking wine in the office. So there was actually a rat hair in Gusteau's toque, and some even believe that it was Remy's mom who was under there, and she was likely killed by Skinner just before the review that brought down Gusteau's restaurant. Number 6. Carpocalypse. This theory is pretty well known, but I still think it's worth talking about here. There are so many interesting things about the Cars world that just don't make sense. Like, if there are no humans around, why do the cars have handles? Why are there human-sized doors and staircases and rooms that cars couldn't operate? Unless the world was originally built by and for humans. More examples like the London Eye and the Eiffel Tower and the fact that sidewalks exist at all prove this theory further. But how did we get here? Some think that at some point in the not-so-distant future, AI built into cars becomes self-aware, and after implanting itself into all the cars being built, decides that humans were no longer necessary, and disposed of them all. After a few thousand years, with fuel supplies running low, the cars actually began to convert the human remains into fuel, like how we use fossil fuels in our current age. Crazy stuff. Number 5. Crazy coincidence. Sticking in the Cars universe, we actually now get to include the Planes movies as well. These films obviously take place in the same world, as planes and cars are seen interacting together all the time. But Planes gave us a very interesting look into the anthropomorphic vehicle's history. We learned from the character Skipper that he fought in what was essentially World War II. But we've established already that there are no humans left on this world, so does that mean that the cars have repeated some of humanity's worst atrocities? Some Reddit theorists believe so, and that opens up the floor for so many more questions, like, was there a car Churchill? Was there an evil mustache Volkswagen? And on another note, if there's a car Pope, does that mean that there was also a car Jesus? So many questions, so little gas mileage. Number 4. Incredibles United. There is a steadfast rule in the Incredibles films from superhero costume maker Edna Mode.
No kicks!
The main reason for this seems to be because she designed the costume for a teen hero named Stratogale, who met her untimely demise due to her cape. Stratogale had many powers, including the ability to talk to birds, and unfortunately, like many birds before her, she got caught in an airplane turbine. But since a bird in an engine causes major damage to a plane, surely a whole human would cause way more. In 1989, one of the worst single aircraft disasters happened when United Airlines Flight 232 suffered an engine failure, causing the plane to crash land, and only 184 of the 296 passengers survived. The plane in The Incredibles bears resemblance to one from United Airlines. Heroes have also been in hiding for 15 years until the film's release in 2004. 15 years before that being 1989. Some believe that in the Incredibles universe, the tragedy of Stratogale and the crash of Flight 232 are one and the same. And that is the reason the heroes had to go into hiding. Number 3. Brave Boo. Boo is by far one of the most adorable characters in the Pixar universe. She's sweet and funny, and she's so very, very sneaky. But some believe that she grows up to be something a bit more sinister. The Witch from Brave. Some theorists think that Monsters, Inc. takes place far into the future, and that the doors they go through don't just lead to different locations, but to different times as well. And this is one of the main ways that the joint universe theory is held together. Boo learns and remembers that doors are somehow the key to finding Sully, or Kitty, again, and devotes her whole life to discovering this secret world. She eventually gains access, but goes through a door that sends her back in time, to the Middle Ages. Here she learns all sorts of magic from the Will-o'-the-Wisps, including the spell that turns Merida's mother into a bear. The driving plot of Brave. Far-fetched, I know, but in the witch's hut is a mountain of evidence proving the witch is a time-traveling Boo. One of the wood carvings is of the Pizza Planet truck, and there's a drawing of Sully on a log in the background, and the witch seems to often disappear through doors.
Coincidence? I think not!
Number 2. Shopper's syndrome. This next theory is one that I haven't really heard talked about much. It states that the company By and Large, the same one that seems to own most of the human world in WALL-E, and earlier on as the company that made Buzz's batteries in Toy Story 3, and the company that forced Carl to leave his house in Up, was actually founded by Syndrome, the villain from the first Incredibles movie. As a young inventor, he created all sorts of robotic technologies that would go on to change and conquer the world. Many of the technological gadgets in WALL-E have a direct connection to Syndrome, such as the zero-point energy that restrains Eve, who also uses flight and organic scanners like Syndrome's Omnidroids. After his death, the company moved away from producing killer robots and began making commercial products, and monopolizing every industry that it could, until eventually, they took over the world just like its founder always wanted. Number 1. All the way up. This final theory is one that I personally believe to be the most plausible and the most heartbreaking. And here's the main thesis. The story of Up is actually Carl Fredricksen's journey to the afterlife, to finally be with his wife Ellie again. Now let's break it down. First of all, the amount of balloons Carl used to lift his house off of the foundations, which Pixar has said is 20,622, is not nearly enough to perform such a feat. So right there, we have a clue that this may not have been real. Many think that Russell is Carl's guardian angel, but he still needs to earn his wings, or, in other words, once he earns his Assisting the Elderly badge, his training will be complete and he will be a full wilderness explorer, or a guardian angel. So now, we have an old man lifting off the ground into the sky and traveling to Paradise Falls. Sure sounds like the journey to heaven to me. Throw in an evil person masquerading as a childhood hero who has evil dogs doing his bidding, not unlike the Hounds of Hell, and you have a pretty good allegory. In the end, Carl reaches Paradise Falls, and we can only hope he is at peace and with Ellie.
Starting off this countdown, we have Finding Nothing. And by this, I'm referring to the Disney Pixar movie Finding Nemo. Theory goes that Nemo is actually dead. Sadly, he didn't survive the attack at the beginning of the film that killed his mother and siblings. The whole movie is actually about a father trying to come to terms with the death of his wife and kids. As a result, Nemo is a figment of his imagination. Now, all the pals that we see along the way are all trying to help Marlin cope with his grief, whereas Dory is said to be his psychiatrist helping him along his journey to acceptance. In fact, the movie shows the 5 stages of grief. First, we have denial, which we can see by Marlin always babying Nemo and not wanting him to go to school. Then we have anger, which was when he got mad at Nemo for swimming out too far. We got bargaining, which was his entire journey across the ocean. Depression, which was when he almost reached Nemo and then he saw him getting flushed down the toilet. And then finally, acceptance, coming to terms with the loss of him. In fact, Nemo in Latin means nobody or nothing. So the name literally translates to finding nobody. In our 9th spot, we have the secret villain. According to this next theory, the real villain of Toy Story 2 is none other than Wheezy the Penguin. Yeah, that's right. In the movie, Woody finds Wheezy all dusty and alone on Andy's bookshelf. For years, he had been severely neglected by Andy, all because he has a broken squeaker. As a result, he became very jealous of all the other toys that Andy loved to play with, especially Woody. Therefore, Wheezy decided to include himself in the yard sale, knowing that Woody would try and come to his rescue and hopefully be sold in the process. It was his scheme all along to try to get rid of his competition and become Andy's #1 favorite toy. Moving on to number 8, we have the pathological liar. Who am I referring to? Cinderella, of course. The story of Cinderella is told from her perspective, but others claim that her stepmother and sisters aren't as sinister as she makes them out to be. In fact, this theory takes a look at it from their perspective. So Cinderella was a young girl from a wealthy family. She was very privileged and never had to do any chores. When her stepmother came into her life, she was trying to teach Cinderella that she can't ride on her privilege and her family's wealth. So she gets her to start helping around the house by doing household chores. But since Cinderella has never done any chores in her entire life, she feels like she's being punished. And she makes everything more dramatic than it actually is. So she acts like she's doing really cruel chores. Then her sisters seem evil since they are living in a house that's rightfully hers. So the whole movie is about Cinderella overreacting to every little thing, simply because she has a poor work ethic. In our 7th spot, we have the evil nanny. Mary Poppins may be a little stern at times, but she only has the best intentions, right? Or does she? According to this theory, Mary Poppins is the master at manipulation. She may seem practically perfect, but in reality, she is a cruel demigod that is trying to gain control of the entire human race. I mean, she definitely has superhuman capabilities, like, hello, her endless bag of stuff, or the fact that she can fly with an umbrella. Now, her plan begins by infiltrating families and getting them to conform to her ways. All the families end up blindly following her ways. We see that she has mass admirers and devoted followers. She is slowly but surely taking control over families so that they will always do what she says, and she can end up ruling the world with a loyal following. In our sixth spot, we have Up to Heaven. The Disney Pixar movie Up has one of the saddest beginnings in Disney movie history. It's a real tearjerker. The only thing worse than that might be this theory. So according to this theory, Carl died in his sleep shortly after his wife passed away. The adventure he goes on through the movie is his journey to the afterlife. I mean, he literally is in his balloon house floating up to the sky, aka towards heaven. Russell is his guardian angel trying to make sure that he gets to heaven unharmed. We are now at our fifth and halfway mark with The Purge. This one has got to be one of my personal favorites, just because of how outrageous and hilarious it is. So we all know of the movie High School Musical. I mean, it's a movie that defined my childhood. To this day, I still have every single song memorized, and yes, I brag about that, okay? Those songs are everything. Anyway, this theory suggests that High School Musical and The Purge exist in the same universe. I know, but how else can you explain how the students get away with trashing the cafeteria, or how Lava Springs in the second movie didn't get shut down, or how Miss Darbus got away with forgery by applying to Juilliard on behalf of Troy? Seriously, none of their actions have consequences. You know where else you can get away with anything? On the Purge night once a year. Just saying. Making our way down the list at number 4, we have the hallucinations. Let's move on and take a look at Alice in Wonderland, shall we? Whether we look at the book or the Disney movie adaptation, it seems like the theme of drug use is always apparent. This theory states that Alice is a drug addict that would go on crazy trips. In fact, it is said that the author Lewis Carroll was an opium user. It was rumored that he was on drugs while writing this book. So in the Disney movie, we have the caterpillar that is constantly taking hits from his pipe. We have Alice who drinks potions and eats mushrooms and other edibles that have different effects on her body, quite literally, and the whole movie is filled with crazy characters and events. So the White Rabbit is the alias that her drug dealer goes by. He says, "I'm late for an important date," meaning he's got to be on time for all these drug exchanges. The theme of madness present throughout the film highlights how dangerous the effects of drugs can have on you and how it can cause you to spiral into madness. In our third spot, we have The Gruesome Murder. The Emperor's New Groove was actually a really good movie. Like, it deserves more attention. Like, Yzma and Kronk are an iconic duo. Now, this theory shows how evil Yzma actually is. In fact, it's thought that Kuzco isn't the first human Yzma has turned into a creature. So in one of the scenes, Kuzco ends up wandering into a scary-looking jungle. While doing so, he witnesses a fly trapped in a spider web. The fly says, "Help me," right before being viciously eaten by a spider. Well, isn't it quite weird that the fly had the ability to talk? I mean, Kuzco interacts with several other animals in the movie and none of them can talk, except this fly. So this has led people to believe that that fly was actually a human that Yzma then turned into a fly, meaning that that scene is much darker than we realized. It's the human's last moments of life. In our second spot, we have the deathbed. According to this next theory, Snow White may not have had a happy ever after. So in the film, we see that Snow White is woken up by her true love's kiss. But in reality, the prince is the personification of death. Snow White was laying on her deathbed. The prince's kiss was actually a Dementor's kiss that sucked the last little bit of life out of her, meaning she actually ends up dying at the end of the film. She then wakes up and imagines her perfect ending, riding off with her prince. Notice how she rides off to a castle literally in the clouds? Hello, she's on her way to heaven. And in our number 1 spot, we have the Angel of Death. This theory revolves around the film Peter Pan, Peter being the Angel of Death. Theory goes that Peter comes and takes the souls of dying children. He then takes their hand and guides them to heaven, aka Neverland. Now, this explains why the Lost Boys and other kids in Neverland don't grow up. It's because they are already dead, which is pretty sad if you ask me. This also means that Wendy commits a murder-suicide by killing herself and her brothers since they all go to Neverland with Peter. Now, author of Peter Pan J.M. Barrie created this land for his brother that passed away at 13. So the theory about Neverland being for dead kids is kind of true.
Number 10. Pitching Aladdin. Aladdin is a lovely movie about valuing yourself beyond the external appearance of riches and fame. However, the majority of the story is made possible by the enigmatic genie, who himself is a being of awesome power, able to grant any of 3 wishes. And while the story is wonderful, we do need to remember how it opens. See, at the beginning of the film, Aladdin is presented as a sort of sales pitch by a merchant, which is a tactic frequently used with the hopes of getting people to spend more on goods than the goods are actually worth. Because of this, and due to the film's ending, it's entirely possible that the story is meant to scam us, the purchaser, out of our hard-earned money. Number 9. Cars. A world where anthropomorphic cars exist in the place of humans. It's cute, but certainly not if you think about it for more than a couple of seconds. Why are bugs cars? Are all living things in this universe cars? Down to the bacteria? Where does gas come from? Dinosaurs? But if bugs are cars, wouldn't dinosaurs also have been cars as well? Going on the establishment of this universe as everything that lives must be a car or some sort of motor vehicle, then that would make the act of drinking gasoline an act of cannibalism. Oh my god. How do cars reproduce? Oh, no, I can't. Number 8. The Old Mill. The Old Mill is a short film from 1937 produced by Disney. It's an interesting film that delves into a surrealist presentation of life on an old and disused windmill. However, some theorize that there's a much more sinister meaning behind the film's existence. See, the dreamlike nature and strange angling of the Old Mill suggests that the film is, in its entirety, a dream. As it progresses further into a storm, the dream becomes a nightmare, which is commonly experienced at REM sleep. In particular, REM sleep is a point in which the sleeper is the closest to death, where their mind becomes as close as it ever will be to the beyond. Scary stuff, right? Only in waking does the sleeper escape their mortality. Number 7. Post-Aladdin. Returning to Agrabah, there's another theory which has been rattling around about the potential state of its world. See, Aladdin primarily takes place within a singular city. The only time it doesn't are when we visit the tomb or take a brief dip in the ocean. However, one theory goes that, based on inferred meaning from several lines, the film may take place in the far distant future, to the point where even the name of the real world Arabia may have been altered as dialects have changed and language evolved into the similar but distinct Agrabah. If the genie had spent 10,000 years to get his so-called crick in the neck, then we must wonder what length of time in history could have passed for such an artifact to have been built and then passed on. This theory is supported by the genie's frequent pop culture references, ones which he could not have known. Number 6. Wheezy. Yes, Stinky Pete was the villain of Toy Story 2. We all know that. Oh, what a big bad man, sure, but I know the truth. Remember Wheezy? Cute, gentle, discarded Wheezy, so comfortable in his new disuse as he was tossed aside by Andy? Wheezy, who was only played with for 3 to 6 months before his speaker broke? He watched, cold, mute, and alone as Andy picked up better toys, toys that didn't break. And then, when he found the yard sale, there was a glimpse of hope. Perhaps he might be able to escape his misery, his life stuck behind the bookshelf. But that hope is cruelly stolen from him by that wretched cowboy who hides him away once more in the shelves, that paper prison where he's rotted for so long. And then, when Buster takes Wheezy, it's a dream come true. But once more, Woody throws himself into the fray. Wheezy's eternal warden of hate. But when Woody is taken for his troubles by Al, it reveals something. Perhaps Wheezy planned this whole thing. He knew Woody would have tried to save him, and so he made sure that Woody was caught by the infamous toy collector. Al's Toy Barn is a constant commercial. Wheezy would have seen it at some time. A desperate plan, and ultimately one that was necessary for his freedom. Number 5. Fantasia. Disney's Fantasia is an artistic masterpiece, a surrealist showcase of animated skill and talent. However, it shares some interesting similarities with another work, one which many might know, Dante's Inferno. See, the beginning of the film could be interpreted as the flashing of a man's life before his eyes, the result of one passing on. From there, he is confronted by a devilish figure, and eventually taken up into heaven. With a precedent set by the old mill, it's clear that many workers at Disney were interested in portraying surrealist dreams, and with the amount of chemicals produced by the brain as one passes away, it's possible that the entire structure of this film was meant to represent this. Number 4. End of Snow White. Snow White, a Disney classic. A tale of romance, joy, and music. A tale of the end. In the opening of the film, Snow White is singing into a well when she is approached by a prince on a white steed. A common trope for sure, until we think about the implications of the color of the steed. When looking at the horsemen of the apocalypse, there are 2 riders whose horses are of a white color, one being conquest, the other death. I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and he who sat on it had the name Death, and Hades was following with him. A quote from the Book of Revelations. So, when Snow White eludes the prince here, only for him to find her at the story's end where she lay in the throes of poison, we must wonder, where was he taking her? I believe it's to her end. Her true end. Number 3. Hey Hey. In Moana and in Hawaiian legends, there are many gods. Several are central to the plot of the film. However, none are more devious than the one hidden within. That's right, Hey Hey is a demigod. This bizarre chicken is present for it all, and despite his immediate clumsiness, he is surprisingly durable. A normal chicken will live for roughly 5 to 10 years, and yet during the lifespan of Moana, Hey Hey never changes, never ages, just simply is. He does not need to eat nor sleep. All Hey Hey needs to do is be present to watch over his charge, Moana. And Moana does know this. She refuses to eat him with the statement that there's more to him than many think. I agree. Number 2. Carl. If you thought the beginning of Up was heavy, wait until you hear this. Carl is an old man, one who's lived for an extremely long life and is likely close to his end. This theory claims that he's already passed on, with Russell being his guardian angel. The idea of earning badges makes sense when contextualized by earning wings. Russell's desperation for Carl's approval is then justified by the fact that his entire existence requires Carl to be a good person, the earning of the badge being a symbol of Carl's kindness. And if angels can assume different forms, it would make sense for them to assume the form of a child, as Carl and Ellie were never able to have children, something which would have made him happier to see. Number 1. Wall-E food. A journey through space requires a massive amount of time and preparation. Resources are important, and their management is even more so. In Wall-E, the ships that are transporting humans throughout the stars have clearly been doing so for an extremely long time, far past the projected point that they'd initially imagined. So, what then are they eating? Apparently, it's a synthetic protein shake, but you can't just whip nutritious molecules out of the thin air. That's sorcery. So where do the materials for these foods come from? Completely separate question. How do they dispose of bodies? And don't tell me it's cremation. Lighting a fire on a spaceship is such a ludicrous idea, I will laugh you into the sun.
Bring off this list in our number 10 spot, we have the Peter Pan connection. This is a theory that states that Captain Hook of the Peter Pan world is actually responsible for the death of Ariel's mother. It isn't until the 2008 film The Little Mermaid: Ariel's Beginning where we heard about Ariel's mother's death. In the film, King Triton explains that her mother, Queen Athena, met her demise at the hands of horrible pirates. Definitely makes a lot more sense as to why the man is so strict about the whole human thing, but fans have spotted something in the Peter Pan movie that drives this theory home even more. In Peter Pan, we see an unnamed but red-headed mermaid, and some believe that the signature red hair just shows that she must have been Ariel's mom. This, coupled with how scared the mermaids that Peter makes friends with in Neverland are of Captain Hook, we can easily put two and two together and see that it's entirely possible that their fear stems from him having taken the life of their queen. In our number 9 spot today, we have the Siren Song. Of course, Ariel and Prince Eric have that sort of love at first sight romance that is all too common for Disney movies, but some think that there may be something sinister lurking behind this fast romance. One Little Mermaid theory suggests that Ursula wants Ariel's voice so badly because she knows it holds real magical properties. Taking it back to the legends of long ago, sirens in mythology took many forms, but in some of the later mythology, they began to sound extremely mermaid-like. One thing that didn't change about these creatures, however, is that they had these voices that drew even the best of men into their traps. Some believe that perhaps Ariel is, or at least is modeled after these creatures. This entire theory could possibly explain why Eric was so ready to marry Vanessa so soon after meeting her, because he's been bewitched by her voice. In our number 8 spot today, we have the second choice. This is a theory that really goes well with the last one. This theory, however, suggests that Ariel isn't Eric's first choice and that he is actually just settling for her. Basically, people believe that Eric is really just looking for the woman who belongs to the voice he heard and possibly became enchanted with, should it actually hold some sort of magical abilities like we just discussed. In getting with Ariel initially, especially when we see him nearly kiss her on the lagoon, he is just kind of settling for her as a second choice, not knowing that she has the voice he's looking for. This also makes sense as to why he is so intrigued by Vanessa, because she has the voice he's been looking for and he's totally willing to ditch Ariel for it. He is continually searching for the voice he heard, but may have just been settling for Ariel as second best. In our number 7 spot today, we have Ariel's illness. This is a Little Mermaid theory that comes from the Reddit user 7th LTR, and they wrote, quote, "Ariel is a schizophrenic. The voices in her head are Flounder and Sebastian. They tell her that the world is better inside her head, under the sea. She longs to be normal or a part of that world. Her father, Trident, is overprotective of her because of her schizophrenia. Ursula is really Ariel's doctor. She gives Ariel medicine to stop the voices in her head, gives her legs, but because she has been living in her own world, she doesn't know how to communicate with normal people. She can't talk. Eric is really a nurse that she becomes obsessed with. Ariel develops the idea that Ursula is trying to steal Eric from her when Ursula transforms herself into a beautiful woman to try and lure Eric away from Ariel. Therefore, she stops taking her medicine, so she goes back into her own world. Ariel goes back into the ocean in the movie. Eric then tells her otherwise, so she begins treatment again and learns how to live in the real world with the help of Eric. She gets her legs and her voice and she marries him and they live happily ever after. I mean, this is an absolutely wild theory, but it does have some people convinced. What do you think? In our number 6 spot today, we have Washed Ashore. This is another theory that was posted to Reddit and is definitely one of the creepiest on this list. Basically, this theory suggests that everything is quote-unquote normal up until Ariel meets Ursula. As we all well know, Ariel asks for legs, but Ursula says it's something she can't do. Ariel wants them so badly, so she begs and pleads for so long and so desperately that eventually Ursula gives in to give her what she wants. Ursula splits Ariel's fin in two and sends her up to the surface of the ocean. Here's where things get dark in this theory though. When I say she cuts her fin in two, I mean literally. She cuts her fin to mimic legs. After being sent up to the surface, Ariel is washed ashore, but by the time she makes it to the beach, she's already lost too much blood. As Eric walks along the beach, he finds her barely awake. At this point, in the haze of her dying state, Ariel sees Eric and thinks she has finally met her prince on land. What continues on in the movie is all made up in Ariel's mind as she passes away, but in reality, Eric just left her on the beach alone. Yeah, Definitely a pretty dark theory, that's for sure. In our number 5 spot today, we have the true form. Vanessa in The Little Mermaid is of course the dark-haired human form that Ursula takes in order to steal Prince Eric from Ariel, but some think that this disguise is revealing something more than what may meet the eye. People especially think this because, I mean, why would she create an entirely new human form and think up a new person instead of just recreating what Ariel already looks like in order to steal her man? This is why some people suspect that perhaps Vanessa is actually Ursula's true form. That Ursula is actually a mermaid, but she appears as this octopus creature because it's actually a punishment from a crime in her past. This also could explain why King Triton hates her so much, as well as why she lives as a societal outcast. Maybe she did something horrible and was banished from the kingdom and made to live life as a different creature. In our number 4 spot today, we have The Wreck. So there are of course a ton of Disney universe theories as to how different movies could be linked together. I mean, we started off with the Peter Pan connection, and I never get tired of reading all of the creative theories people have come up with or the Easter eggs people have found that prove the connections, but this is one I definitely never thought of. In The Little Mermaid, we see Ariel explore a shipwreck close to the beginning. I mean, it's one of the most iconic scenes in the movie. A giant shark appears and it threatens both Ariel and Flounder's lives. It truly was a terrifying moment for 6-year-olds everywhere. But this theory adds an eerie layer to the movie scene. Some believe that the ship in the wreck is the one that once belonged to Anna and Elsa from Frozen's parents. We now know that they unfortunately passed in the beginning of the first Frozen movie, but we don't know a lot about how, except for that it was on a ship, which has led people to this definitely compelling theory. In our number 3 spot today, we have the sister connection. Ever wondered why Ariel and her 6 sisters all look different from one another? Well, some believe that this difference in appearance points to a hidden storyline where all of the sisters actually have different mothers. Yeah, King Triton was getting pretty busy under the sea. People who believe this theory speculate that King Triton was busy with a bunch of different women in order to spread his bloodline as far as possible. Along with this theory is the suggestion that Ariel is the king's favorite, but not everyone can agree why. Some believe that she is her dad's favorite because of the fact that he and Ariel's mom are still together, but if you agree with the Captain Hook theory, we know this is untrue. That is why some people have speculated that perhaps Ariel is the favorite because her mother met such a violent and untimely death, and the king wants to protect her even further. In our number 2 spot today, we have overprotected. This theory has to do more with our favorite best buddy Flounder than it does Ariel, and it is said that this theory originated on Christine Morehouse Blogspot, where they claimed that they knew why Flounder was such a worrywart and was so caring for his friend Ariel. Basically, they suggested that he was over-nurtured as a child. Because of this caring background, he developed a certain bond with his mother, and once she left, it caused him to struggle a bit in his adult life. This over-nurturing led to him becoming fearful of his surroundings. He's overly cautious and worried about not only himself, but those that he loves. I mean, I never really thought of Flounder as potentially having had a harmful childhood, but those who speculate on these kinds of theories and such never miss anything. In our number 1 spot today, we have the stormy waters. In the beginning of the Little Mermaid movie, we see Prince Eric's royal ship run into a storm that truly almost costs him his life. It's a very stressful aspect of the movie. I mean, it's the thing that almost makes this famous love story not happen. But while this moment is already dark, some think that there might be something even more sinister going on. Some fans think that King Triton actually caused the storm on purpose. People believe that he got so fed up with Ariel visiting the surface and obsessing over humans that he wanted to do something about it and take away the temptation. So, alas, he started a storm and tried to cause a shipwreck. I mean, King Triton is harsh, but he couldn't be willing to risk all of those sailors' lives, right?